The Grand Assembly Hall of the Eternal Empire had never known silence like this. Not the comfortable silence of unanimous agreement. Not the reverent silence that greeted Emperor Zalor when he swept through its obsidian doors in ceremonial regalia. This was a different kind of silence, raw, confused, uncertain, the silence of 1,000 alien delegates who did not know what they had just witnessed. Mara Ellison lay on the polished floor of the speaking platform. She had not fainted. She had not stumbled. Her legs had simply stopped working somewhere between the third paragraph of her diplomatic address and the word sovereignty. The neural fatigue from 48 hours of continuous interspecies negotiations, compounded by oxygen levels calibrated for Zalor's people rather than hers, had finally collected their debt. She was conscious. Embarrassingly, painfully conscious. She could see the ceiling, a vaulted expanse of deep violet crystal etched with the lineage glyphs of every empire that had ever knelt before Zalor's throne. She could hear the shifting of 1,000 bodies in elevated seats above her. She could feel the cold of the floor seeping through her formal jacket, the one her team had spent 3 weeks choosing because the color communicated respectful confidence in Velhari cultural language. What it communicated now, she imagined, was something quite different. Get up, she told herself. Her body declined the invitation. Emperor Zalor of the Eternal Dominion had ruled for 60 planetary cycles. He had received surrenders from 17 civilizations. He had watched warlords weep and philosophers lose their composure in his presence. He considered himself well acquainted with the full spectrum of what lesser species called dignity and how quickly it could be stripped away. He had never seen anything quite like this. From his elevated throne at the chamber's apex, he watched the human envoy lying on his floor, and he felt something he had not felt in decades. He did not know what to do next. Protocol was clear, of course. An envoy who could not stand at the speaking platform was an envoy who had forfeited the floor. The assembly would be marked as incomplete. Earth's petition for protected sovereignty status would be tabled indefinitely, in practice, which meant permanently. The Dominion's expansion commissioners were already waiting at the edge of human space with survey vessels and settlement projections. He should call the recess. He should have the human removed with courtesy, with medical attention, with a formal letter of regret that contained no actual regret whatsoever. It was what the rules said. It was what 60 cycles of rule had taught him to do when the weak stumbled. He opened his mouth. The sound that stopped him came from Section 7G. The Veth delegation, small, gray-furred, brought into the Empire's fold 40 cycles ago, sat in the observer tier with their young. They always brought their young to assemblies. It was their custom, their way of educating the next generation in the ways of the Dominion. Emperor Zalor had always found it mildly inefficient. The cub who howled was barely a season old. It was not a howl of aggression or alarm. Any creature in the hall could have identified it: distress, confusion, the particular cry of something small that had seen something it did not understand and wanted an adult to explain why it was being allowed to happen. 1 cub. Then 2. Then 5. Then the adult Veth were vocalizing, low and resonant, not howling but harmonizing, adding the deeper undertone that in their language said, "We witness this. We do not approve, we are watching." Zalor's jaw closed. He looked at his protocol officer, Commander Tesavac, who looked back at him with an expression that said, "This is not in the manual, Your Eminence." In Section 12B, the Aranai delegate Foss leaned toward her colleague and said, very quietly, "She has been speaking for the humans for 11 hours over 3 days. 11 hours. In atmospheric conditions that require her to take supplemental oxygen every 4 periods, which she has been refusing during active sessions because apparently it interrupts the flow of translation and she did not want to seem weak." Her colleague, who had been in the Dominion's diplomatic corps long enough to recognize the smell of impending historical embarrassment, said nothing. Foss continued, "She traveled 47 light-years. She has eaten, according to the provisions log, approximately 30% of her required caloric intake because human food synthesis equipment was not approved for assembly floors. She has slept for perhaps 6 hours in the last 3 days. A pause. She is still conscious. She fell down and she is still conscious. Below them, Mara Ellison could indeed be seen moving. Not standing, not yet, but moving. Her fingers found the edge of the speaking podium's base. Her jaw was set in a way that suggested she was conducting an internal argument, and the part of her that wanted to stay on the floor was losing. The first thing Mara said when she got her elbow under her was, "I apologize for the interruption." Her voice, fed through the chamber's translation matrix, came out clear. Steady. Infuriatingly, impossibly steady. The hall did not move. She got to one knee. "The proposal I was outlining concerns Article 14 of the Sovereignty Framework, the provision that allows developing civilizations to petition for," she stopped. Breathed. Her hand was shaking against the podium. "For protected status pending cultural maturity review." Emperor Zalar had not called the recess. He was aware of this. He was aware that every delegate in the hall was aware of this. He was also aware, in the particular way that 60 cycles of ruling had sharpened his instincts, that the moment he called it now would be remembered differently than if he had called it 30 seconds ago. Before she moved. Before she spoke. The Veth cubs had gone quiet. They were watching her, small bright eyes tracking her progress from the floor. Mara Ellison got to her feet. It was not graceful. She held the podium with both hands. Her formal jacket had a scuff on the left shoulder. When she looked up at the assembled delegates of the Eternal Dominion, 140 civilizations, 6 centuries of accumulated power, the greatest political body in this arm of the galaxy, her expression contained no apology whatsoever. "Earth," she said, "is not asking for mercy. We are asking for time. There is a difference, and I believe this assembly is sophisticated enough to understand it." Emperor Zalar made a decision. He told himself later that it was strategic. That a human envoy who could fall in front of his entire assembly and stand back up mid-sentence was a human envoy whose civilization was worth investing in rather than absorbing. That the political calculation favored a protected ally over a resentful territorial acquisition. That the Veth vote, and the quiet harmonics still threading through the upper tiers from species who had recognized something in that moment, needed to be managed. He told himself all of this, and some of it was even true. "The Assembly will hear the remainder of Envoy Ellison's address," he said. His voice carried through the hall with the full weight of imperial authority, because Emperor Zalar had never learned to speak any other way. Tessavac bent close to his ear. "Your Eminence, protocol." "I am protocol," Zalar said. Mara spoke for another 20 minutes. She did not let go of the podium. Earth received provisional protected sovereignty status, the first civilization in 40 cycles to be granted it without military leverage or a patron empire's endorsement. The vote was not close. The Veth delegation voted first, unanimously, and the chamber followed in a cascade that the political analysts would spend years untangling. Afterward, in the medical bay where a Dominion physician was explaining the concept of oxygen toxicity thresholds to Mara's exhausted body, a junior aide asked her what she had been thinking about while she was on the floor. Mara stared at the ceiling for a moment. "Getting up," she said. The aide waited, expecting more. "That was it," she said. "Just getting up." 3 weeks later, a Veth cub was born in Section 7G's home colony. Her parents named her Mara. It was, in Veth naming tradition, a word that meant, "the one who stood."